rated M for mature.
Hi, I'm Josh Long, multiplayer designer on Dawn of War 2. Today we're going to showcase a battle report featuring the Balance Redux as part of the There Is Only War update. In this match we'll be featuring Stefan Haynes in the blue corner as Space Marines and Braden Chan in the red corner as Orcs. Stefan, how do you feel about your chances in this match?
I'm feeling good about this match. My opponent's had a bit of a string of bad luck recently, so I'm going to try something a little unconventional.
Alright, so first things first. As part of this balance update, we wanted to put the early game under the microscope. So there are no more upgrades or units that should be glossed over. Everything we put in the game has a specific purpose, and we'll be going over those during the course of the match, so we hope you'll stay tuned.
So I was hoping to go for a slightly different strategy this match, like I mentioned earlier. Rather than go for a scout-heavy build, which I've been doing lately, I was going to go for something a bit more focused on some of the tier 1.5 units. So I'm going to try and get out a Devastator squad early in the game here.
Alright, so you'll notice first things off, a scout-heavy build. Not exactly something we'd really see in the retail game currently. So we've definitely gone out of our way to make scouts a viable unit. Their damage has gone up, their speed has notably increased, so they're a much better counter to melee units in particular.
Yeah, exactly, Josh. So you'll see that my opponent has built a lot of shooter boys. He's anticipating me to go scout heavy because he thinks I'm going to anticipate him going melee heavy, like slugger heavy, like the current retail game. But instead of going scout heavy and falling right into his trap, I'm going to try and get some tier 1.5 out, like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to get a Devastator. So for the early game, I'm going to have to try and stall him out and avoid those shooters as much as I can.
Yeah, so you'll notice there was a little bit of guessing game. In making everything useful, the idea is that there are a lot of choices, a lot of meaningful choices a player can make in the early game as to what you want to use. You're not stuck in one or two strategies anymore. You'll notice that shooters are a lot more viable. Certainly you'd see them in the early game before, but we've definitely made their upgrade a lot better. Their suppression ability should be quite effective.
So here I'm trying to funnel my opponent down this choke here to get some damage on those sluggers, trying to keep them off my attack marines. If I could take out those sluggers and control that war boss, I could have brought in my attacks to deal with those shooters, but he was able to get himself through that choke with his hero and his sluggers and do enough damage to force me back here. So now he's going to put some pressure on my power and try and stop me from getting that tier 1.5 that I was aiming for.
Yeah, you'll notice that Stefan definitely was a bit afraid of those sluggers, and we've made some changes to melee units, mainly on the stat side, to make them pretty fearsome. Melee should be very decisive, so we've made, units like sluggers and hormigons and banshees are a lot stronger and more potent. But certainly on the flip side, with the unit upgrades and changes to units like scouts, we do believe they should have good counters.
Yeah, so right now he's trying to harass my power. He's trying to stop me from getting any sort of power requiring units out. So I'm having to bring out whatever units I can at the moment, which includes my 2 scouts, my force commander, my tac squad. And I gotta force him off this power, because if I lose my power, I'm not gonna be able to get any Devastator squads. I'm not gonna be able to get any ASM squads, and he's gonna put me at a large amount of pressure for the tech race.
Yeah, you'll notice that Stefan actually did need to defend his generators from the shooter boys, because we've actually gone across the board and made most conventional weapons actually pretty effective against buildings. On the other hand, you probably won't be seeing anything like stick bomber grenades or other random things like shuriken platforms destroying your generators anymore, because we've rendered those ineffective as they should be. The last unit I haven't talked about is the tactical marine, as you'll notice here, is actually a very good counter to range units. A large part of this would be because we've given them heavy armor. What heavy armor does is it actually reduces the range fire damage you're going to take, but it's definitely vulnerable to certain things like power weapons. So if those sluggers were to go out and get a burnout, suddenly those attacks would be a lot more vulnerable.
So despite my opponent's early game pressure with his mass tier 1 army, I was able to get that Devastator out. Now I'm going to use this to turn this battle around. So I'm quickly able to suppress that war boss, force him to run, and now I'm going to push up that ramp and attack those shooter boys with my tac squad.
What you'll notice now actually is we are several minutes into the game and neither player has laid down any sort of substantial power generators. This would be because we've actually increased the power cost that Tier 2 requires, extending the length of the game in Tier 1. So no longer is Tier 1 just a formality. What happens in the early game is going to go a long way in shaping to how the rest of the game unfolds.
So I forced back those shooters, but he's coming with his sluggers from behind, and it's caught me kind of with my pants down here. I'm trying to get my heavy bolter set up, trying to suppress those sluggers, but I'm not quite able to. So now I got to try and do a bit of an organized retreat here. I'm trying to spread out my units. He switched targets a bit there, so I got an opportunity, and I was able to retreat both my units with virtually no losses.
Another thing you'll notice when you do get a chance to play is actually that heavy bolters and other suppression weapons have had their kind of the angle on their cost change. So the requisition cost has actually gone down quite significantly, but we have added a power cost. So think of them more as an inexpensive manpower addition to your army, but they are going to slow you down a little bit in the tech race. And we feel that with the larger armies that you're seeing in Tier 1, they're actually quite potent.
Exactly, and that's been the case as well with our new Assault Marine squad. They're a bit higher on power, but they're still just as devastating as before. In fact, if not a bit more devastating with the new higher amount of Tier 1 units on the field. So you'll see that right now I've brought out an Assault Marine squad. I'm hoping to use this mix of my normal Tier 1 army of scouts and tanks, along with my Tier 1.5, my Devastator and Assault Marines, to disrupt his forces and overpower his mainly Tier 1 focused army.
Yeah, you'll notice these ASM are quite durable here. They've also, along with all the other Power Marine wearing troops, received the heavy armor change. So these units will be much more resilient to range fire. However, in the case of power weapons, like on these Storm Boys, and if we do see a burn at some point, they will take additional damage. So while they are potent, there are real counters for other races to use against these powerful troops.
So here you're going to see a bit of a combined arms fight going on. I've got my tank squads just laying down constant fire on those shooters, wearing them down. And meanwhile, I'm bringing up my heavy bolter to prevent his warbots from advancing on my tanks, while I'm just buying time with my tanks to wear them down as my ASMs just harass those shooter boys as much as possible.
Yeah, between the Assault Marines, whose power cost has also gone up a little bit, it looks like Stefan's committed pretty heavily to spending his power in Tier 1. So from a quick look at the resource bars in the bottom right, you'll notice the blue bar represents the amount of power that the player has accumulated, and BC, or Braden, has almost enough to get to Tier 2. What are your plans for this, Stefan?
So right now, I'm feeling pretty confident about the game, and I'm pushing his army back pretty well. He's only focused on Tier 1, so my army's pretty much walking all over him. So I'm looking for a bit of a quick win here. I'm hoping I can just take the map control. I haven't yet noticed that my opponent's built a lot of generators, so I'm thinking he's also still massing Tier 1, and I can just overwhelm him with a more versatile army. So I'm hoping to just get another ASM squad out as I just did, and now I'm just going to keep the pressure on as best I can.
Yeah, certainly with the increased amount of power needed for Tier 2, those generators actually need to survive for quite some time. And it wasn't on screen here, but Braden had been harassing Stefan's power economy quite heavily, so it looks like he is going to get into Tier 2 a lot more quickly. But something to keep in mind is, we understand that Tier 2 is a pretty big leap still with the vehicle armor type coming into play, so we have added some soft counters into the game for players who haven't quite made it to Tier 2 yet.
Yeah, exactly. So what I've done here is I've got my heavy bolter squad, and I'm going to shortly upgrade him with a target upgrade just in case a vehicle happens to come out. At least I'll have something to buy some time against him. But meanwhile, I'm still just constantly harassing my opponent, and I'm trying to take advantage of my Tier 1 army still being vastly superior to his. I haven't yet realized that my opponent's about to go to, or is about